Good afternoon, good evening from the Authors Guild. We're pleased to be here with The Blacklist founder Franklin Leonard and creative director Randy Winston. The Blacklist has been supporting and spotlighting screenwriters for 20 years now and is especially known for its annual list of the best unproduced screenplays. 400 scripts from the site have been produced as feature films, earning 250 Academy Award nominations, 50 wins, including 4 Best Pictures, and nearly half of the last 15 years' screenwriting Oscars. Last month, the Blacklist announced an expansion into fiction with similar features to help authors and spotlight unpublished fiction manuscripts. At the Authors Guild, we occasionally host events like this to keep authors informed about industry trends and opportunities that might be of interest to you. If you're not a member, and I know we have some aspiring authors and curious screenwriters in the crowd, the Authors Guild is the oldest and largest professional association for authors in the US, now with 15,000 members. We provide contract reviews and other legal services. We build websites, offer regional chapter meetups, and educational programs that are typically about the legal and business stuff, career tips for authors. And in general, we advocate on behalf of authors in front of the publishers and in Washington for fair pay, fair copyright, things like that. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question in advance. We've got a nice little talk lined up. After our guests speak for a bit about what they do, we'll address some of the specific questions, but you can use the Q&A box here to ask anything else that comes to mind. And now just some brief bios. Franklin Leonard is a film and television producer and entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of The Blacklist, which we'll hear more about. Franklin has worked at Universal and the production companies of Will Smith, Sidney Pollack and Anthony Minghella, and Leonardo DiCaprio. He's been a juror at the Sundance, Toronto, and Mumbai film festivals, contributing editor at Vanity Fair, among other posts. And in 2019, the Writers Guild of America East bestowed him with the Evelyn Berkey Award for elevating the honor and dignity of screenwriters. Randy Winston is creative director of The Blacklist. He was previously the director of writing programs at the Center for Fiction. He sits on Orion Magazine's board as a trustee, served as fiction editor of Slice Literary Magazine for 6 years. Randy has moderated a couple of educational events of ours in the past, and we're happy to have him back and hear about his new role. And with that, let's get this started. Franklin, I think first, if you just give us the history of how and why you founded The Blacklist, because I think that will speak to why you've expanded into fiction now.
Yeah, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible so we can get to the meat of the fiction stuff. The annual Blacklist, the survey that we do every year of the industry's most liked screenplays, started almost 20 years ago in 2005. This will be our 20th list this December. I was working at Leonardo DiCaprio's production company. My job was to find great screenplays that either he could star in or that he could produce, or people that could write things that he could star in or produce. And I felt like I wasn't doing a very good job of finding those scripts. And so late one night, I sent an email to a bunch of my peers and said, send me a list of your 10 favorite unproduced screenplays. In exchange, I will send you the combined list. I did this all anonymously. It very quickly went viral in the industry, like very early in the days of internet virality, and became something of an arbiter of taste in the business for screenplays. The statistics that you cited earlier are actually for the annual Blacklist. I think it's important that we make the distinction between that and stuff that come through the website, though there have been a number of scripts that have come through the website that have gone on to Golden Globe nominations, Emmy nominations. My own wife's directorial debut was from a script that she found on the Blacklist website. But the 400 produced movies is from scripts on the annual Blacklist survey. So did that in 2005. By 2010, the notion of a once yearly PDF that circulated the industry via email had already become kind of quaint. In the intervening years, social media happened, iPhones happened, and the ways in which we share information on the internet just changed dramatically. And I wanted to build something that would be, frankly, more responsive to me as an industry executive. By this point, I was working at Universal and then for Will Smith's company. It's great to know what's great in December, but what about in March? What about in June? What if I'm looking for a comedy for someone of high school age? How can I find good material of that description? And the only way to do that really was to call around to all the agencies and say, what do you have that's like this? And most of the time, people would say that they had things, and they would send them over, and they wouldn't be anything of the sort that you were looking for. You read the script and then call them back and say, "I asked for a high school comedy. You sent me a 17th century pirate adventure story," and the answer was like, "Well, we were just hoping you'd read it and like it, and then we might be able to do something with it." So I wanted to find an efficient way to find what I was looking for. And in the process of building atop the annual blacklist, a website that could function in that way, I realized that we could solve a bigger problem. And that was that whenever I would go speak, in gatherings like this about, you know, the first, I would talk about the blacklist. And the first question that I would invariably be asked is some version of, it's great that you're helping writers who are already in the system, who already have representation, to get the attention that their script deserves. But I wrote what I think is a pretty good screenplay. How can I get it to somebody who can do something with it? And I was still relatively early in my career. I didn't have a great answer to that question or one that felt satisfactory to me. And I would come back to LA and I would ask people who were more wise about the business, what is the answer to this? If we assume that writing is the font from which all other things flow, like no one else can do their jobs until someone has written a script, surely there's a plan to find and recruit the best writers out there. And the answer that I always got was some version of, well, look, you can enter the Nickel Academy, the Nickel Fellowship, which is the Academy screenwriting contest. It's once a year. There's 7,000 entrants. If you place in the top 100, someone will probably call you. Or it was, just look, move to LA, network until someone pays attention to you. And then, over a long enough time horizon, the industry's a meritocracy. And I think I'm probably a little sensitive to those kind of, let's say, labor dynamics, just having been Black and growing up in West Central Georgia, because I know for a fact there are a ton of people out there that are wildly talented that don't have the wherewithal to move to Los Angeles and get a day job and network until someone pays attention to their work. But that doesn't mean they're not a good screenwriter. And that's bad for writers that the business is set up that way, but it's worse for the industry because it means that there's all this amazing talent out there that we don't know about and we can't find to acquire their scripts and make them and hopefully profit. And so it's bad for all parties, but no one has come up with a solution. And so we built that. We basically allowed anybody to create a free writer profile on the Blacklist website. We allowed them to pay to host their screenplays on a monthly basis on the website. We hired a team of readers, all of whom have worked for at least a year as at least assistants in the business, so they have some familiarity with the market. We further vet them based on the quality of their feedback. And if that feedback is good, we, both in an automated way and in some very targeted ways, start amplifying the visibility of those screenplays and now pilots plays, and we'll talk about fiction, to everyone in the film and television business, saying essentially, hey, everybody, this is something that at least one person who knows says is really good. You should check it out. And then whatever happens, happens. If you get a deal, if you sell your screenplay to a producer, you get a director attached, you don't owe us any money. We're not going to have our hand in your pocket. You retain the rights to your script throughout the time that it's hosted on the website. We're trying to build a system that allows anybody who has a great piece of work. Initially, it was screenplays, but pilots, television, and now fiction. If it's great, we want to get it into all of the hands of the people who can do something with it. I'll say one thing just by way of analogy. Historically speaking in Hollywood, the hey, move to LA, network until someone pays attention to you is a little bit like the NBA saying, oh, you want to be a professional basketball player? Our offices are in Midtown Manhattan. Move to New York, play in a pickup game near the offices. Someone will probably see you, and then we'll assign you to a team. One can only imagine how bad the NBA would be if that was the case. But for the most part, and there are reasons for this, but they're not good reasons in the internet age, why people are limited in what they're even exposed to material-wise, writing-wise, that prevents them from having the success that they would want to have if they could only know that these things exist.
So, so what spurred the fiction expansion? I mean, it's growth for you, but also there's a lot of adaptation work going on in Hollywood. What was the main factor for you?
The main factor was people in the fiction space telling us that there would be value in it, honestly. I've cited Howie Sanders at Anonymous Content, who's, was a book to film agent at UTA for a long time and is now at Anonymous Content, would ask me from time to time, like, look, some of the same dynamics that exist in film and television vis-a-vis finding writers and finding material exist in the book world, right? Like the people who are evaluating material and deciding what to buy, there's a superabundance of material coming to them. It's natural, just like in the film and television world, that they're going to default to the biggest agents, the people who they know personally, the institutions that have historically produced other people that have been able to penetrate that system. But that doesn't mean that that's all the good stuff. And there's no easy way to find all the good stuff if it doesn't come through one of those means. If you could adapt what you're doing in film and television into fiction, there would be value in that. And doubly so because of the increased relationship between the book world and the film and television world. It's no secret that Hollywood is looking for underlying IP. And what they mean by that is just stories that have an audience that they can leverage when they make the thing as a film and television show. And it's also no secret that making the film and television show can drive book sales. So it only makes sense that the market for that material would be closer to being one than two wholly separate ones with some connective tissue between the two. And we had already built a platform that, with some minor changes, would allow for that. And so, at Howie's, I resisted for a very long time. I was like, look, I'm not an expert in the book world. The film and TV thing works because my career has been in film and TV, and it was purpose built to solve that problem. And he said, look, I'm going to set 10 to 15 meetings for you. Meet with those people, tell them how you would adapt it into the book space, and tell them to tell you where you're wrong. I think what you're going to find is that people will be very excited about it. And that's basically what happened. And at that point, I very earnestly decided that we needed someone on the team full time who not only knew the book world, but specifically came at it as a champion of writers. And I was lucky enough to be connected by four separate people to Randy and brought him on board. And then we did several dozen, if not more meetings to just talk through with all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. This is what we're thinking. This is how we would do it. This is why we do it that way. How can we do it better? And that's how we ended up here. And I'll say, by the way, this conversation is part of an ongoing conversation that we're going to have as long as we exist, which is this is how we do it. This is why we do it that way. How can we do it better? And we always welcome constructive criticism from all aspects of the business, which isn't to say we're going to make those changes necessarily, but we absolutely want to hear about ways in which we can make this better and more efficient for all parties to be a tide that raises all boats.
Yeah, Randy reached out to the Authors Guild, talked with several of us a while back, and I know you talked with publishers, agents. To back up, because some people might not know what the normal path is in traditional publishing. So the big publishers require a literary agent to submit on your behalf, typically. Some smaller publishers, some imprints don't require an agent and the author can submit directly. But basically, the author is submitting a query letter, they're finding leads and pursuing those to get their book published. Randy, do you have any thoughts on that? I know I said to you initially, it seems like the agenting process is like most heavily disrupted by this.
Um, what I was saying, and this is feedback directly from agents that I've talked to, whether it's the big agencies or the boutique agencies, is that what we're providing is a tool that can be useful for them. Like their inboxes are slammed. It's no secret that a lot of people that work in the book space are overworked and underpaid. And so any resource that's going to be helpful in the path to finding the books that folks want to read and folks want to rep and folks want to edit, then they are completely open to it, which is the feedback that we got. We met with a lot of agencies from, or a lot of agents from a lot of agencies, and still are. We're still having those meetings, both Franklin and I, myself here in New York. And the feedback is always the same. This is going to be really helpful for us, and or this is already helpful for us. Um, so I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question. That's the feedback that we've been getting. It is, you always want to move on the side of caution. And so as we took those meetings, we are very sensitive to what people's thoughts and opinions might be. but the feedback that we've been getting before the launch and even now is that this is going to be a tool that's really helpful for agents.
Yeah, if I could jump in here too, and I'm seeing a question in the Q&A from Sandra Jackson Opoku, how is the blacklist different from or advantageous to getting a book agent and marketing your work that way? What I would say is to do both if you can. We are certainly not a replacement for an agent, and anyone at all who's in a position to sell the rights to their work to another party should have an expert in that representation representing you in that deal. So no one should think that the blacklist exists to replace agents, because we absolutely do not. If anything, we exist on one hand to supercharge the work of agents when you have one, and two, to put you in the best position to create visibility, demand for, excitement about your book to both prospective agents and prospective buyers, right? In the traditional way that you would get information about your work to a publisher or your work to an agent would be that you would send a query letter, to either party. If they're interested in reading it, they may send an email to you back saying, here's a rights waiver that you have to sign, and then they'll read it. But if they love it, they're probably not going to tell other people, right? So if the publisher loves it, they're probably not going to tell other people because they're like, oh, we know something that no one else knows. The dynamic that we're trying to create is that when you submit your work to the blacklist, you're giving us permission to share that work with the members of our professional community, all of whom have been approved based on their ability to do something with it and their expertise in the field before they can even have access to any of the material. But when your work gets a really high score from feedback, we then tell everybody. So it's not just one agent who reads it saying, oh, I like this. It's however many agents we have as industry professional members, however many filmmakers, producers, studio executives, assistants, editors who are getting the same message. This is something good. You should pay attention to it. And the hope is, and we've seen this happen on the screenplay side, both with the annual list and the website, is that increased visibility in an open market, as opposed to just with one individual person who now likes your work, has the potential to create really positive outcomes for writers.
Great. Now, a lot of people asked beforehand and in the Q&A. So what genres are included? Specifically, is there an age minimum like middle grade or YA? And then short story collections, novellas. What kind of guidelines do you have on that front?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, let's jump into that. So on the genre side, you're seeing all genres. So middle grade, I should start with no, we're not accepting picture books and illustrations, but there are middle grade books that do not have pictures. So we're accepting middle grade, we're accepting YA, literary fiction, romance, thriller, suspense, you name it, it's on there. Science fiction, fantasy, historical fiction. The idea is that we are including all fiction as long as there is no illustrations or pictures. And this is in addition to the fact that there won't be anything on the short fiction side. So novellas, short story collections. The idea behind that is we just got into novels, right? For fiction. We want to make sure that we are doing that very well. And I think everyone or I know that a lot of people that are watching understand genre, like the different genres of fiction. Like romance is a completely different universe from, say, like a middle grade, unless it's a bend of both, right? There's science fiction and all the tools and elements and rules that come with that genre. There's crime fiction and all the rules and elements that come with that. There's thriller and all the rules. And so we want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can do on the novel front, period. And then, further on down the line with success, we'll turn back and look and evaluate. But right now, novels, and specifically those genres of novels are where we're like really planting our flag. Franklin, if you want to add anything in there, you can.
I was thinking it might make sense for me to just jump in and do the rundown of how the site functions, because I feel
Yeah.
like I worry that in talking about some of this stuff,
Yeah.
and just looking at the Q&A, there are probably some questions that I can just blow through answers for, and we can get into the meat of it. So for writers, here's sort of the component parts of the site. One is creating a writer profile, which is entirely free. So you can go on the Blacklist website, you can create a writer profile. Think of this as your IMDb or Wikipedia page that is writer specific, photo, brief bio, and you can list all the things that you've written, right? All of your novels, unpublished, self-published, published. You can include a brief synopsis, a brief description of the thing. You can include what genres it's in. You can tag it. We have a system, I believe, is over 700 tags to describe what it is that your novel is. And that just listing your scripts on your profile puts just that information in our database that's accessible by fiction publishing industry professionals, but also film and television industry professionals. So if as a producer, I wake up one morning and say, I would really love to find a sci-fi movie with a female protagonist, I can go on the Blacklist website and search for that. And even if I'm searching for screenplays, if you've written a novel, if you've written an unpublished novel by that description that's listed in your profile, that will come up. And if I read that description and say, oh, that sounds interesting, I actually would like to read it, then I can go to your writer profile page, I can see that maybe you don't have representation, I can contact you via the internal messaging system of the Blacklist website and say, hey, this sounds interesting, I'd like to read it. Or if you are represented, let's say you're a published author and you've got listed on your profile your published work, that person can reach out to your agent and say, hey, I'd like to know more about this. What's the right status of it, et cetera, right? So I think there were a lot of questions about what the value is of a writer profile for unpublished, self-published, published authors.
Yeah.
That's roughly what we're thinking. Now, if you want to make your material directly downloadable to our industry professional members, and I should say here, our industry professional members are film, television, theater, and publishing industry professionals who've been selected based on their previous success in the business and their ability to acquire material, produce movies, get movies made as a director or an actor. They've all been approved for membership by us, and we would not hesitate to ban bad actors if they behaved inappropriately within the context of our site. So you can host your material to make it directly downloadable by our industry professionals. That is a $30 a month fee per manuscript. What I would say, and one of the first questions that people ask me is, I've written 5 novels. You're really asking me to pay $150 a month to host my material? And to that I say, absolutely not. Do not host all 5 of your manuscripts. Create a writer profile, list all 5 of them. Probably, if it was me, I would choose the thing that I felt was the strongest representation of my work, the thing that I thought, if anybody reads this, this is the one. Host that one, right? See how it goes. If you start to have a really positive experience with it, you can reassess and then consider hosting more, but do not, and no one is recommending, including me as the owner of the site, to host 5 manuscripts and see how it goes, right? That would be probably not the best use of your money. So that gives you host your manuscript. And when you host your manuscript, you're also asked to host an excerpt, which is typically between 90 and 100 pages, right? Randy, that's the official length.
Yeah.
You can also purchase feedback on your work. And in this case, that feedback, which is $150 per, 100 of which goes to our readers. Again, all of our readers have worked for at least a year, at least reading fiction specifically for fiction purposes. Our screenplay readers are not reading your manuscripts. It is fiction readers reading fiction. They read the excerpt and they rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 overall based on how likely they'd be to recommend it to their peer or superiors in the industry. There's no objective standard. I personally don't believe in an objective standard of art. What we're trying to do is capture the subjectivity of people's responses to the work. One of the first questions that we often get asked, why is it only an excerpt? Here's the answer. I imagine a scenario where someone has written a 600-page novel, and that novel is not terribly strong. Obviously, I'd love to be able to give feedback to that writer, But I also, if I'm going to ask a reader to read a 600-page novel, I should pay them appropriately for their time. And I don't think it's appropriate for me to incentivize somebody who has a 600-page novel, who has no real hope of ever getting it published, to pay what would be a fair thing to pay that reader to read the 600-page novel. So we're splitting the difference. 100 pages roughly is what our readers are being paid for. They're being paid $100 for that. And then when we share information with our industry professionals about this is something we're recommending, we're very transparent about the fact that we're basing that recommendation on the first 100 pages, which if you ask anyone in the screenplay world or the publishing world is a pretty good, runway to determine, is this something I want to keep reading? Will some people fall off after 110 pages? Absolutely, and we're very transparent about that. But what we're trying to do is find an efficient way that we can pay readers appropriately, have appropriate costs for writers, but still make really consistent, high-quality recommendations to people who might want to read people's work. A few other answers, a few other thoughts on, yeah, go ahead.
Just a note on the length of an excerpt. And a lot of what we're doing on the site is built on the feedback we've gotten from published authors, feedback we've gotten from editors and agents pre-launch. And so, like, the thing that I always hear, and this was before I started at the Blacklist, this was when I was working at the Center for Fiction, when I was working at a literary magazine, when I was in an MFA program, what editors, agents are always saying is, I will look at the first 20 pages. I know pretty quickly what I want. And I know pretty quickly what's working and what's not working. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Like we're not saying, all right, we're going to do an excerpt of 20. We're saying 100 because we want to guarantee that when they're coming on the site and looking for the thing, that at least the first 100 pages, we can guarantee them that this is solid.
Yeah, just a few additional points on the feedback. The feedback that you're going to get, it's the overall numerical score and then a bunch of subcategory scores, and that information is available on the web, what those categories are. You're also going to get 250 words roughly about what the excerpt's greatest strengths are, basically what's working for the reader, 250 on what's not working for the reader, and then 100 to 150 words on what their individual assessment of the commercial prospects for that book is. We're very explicit with our readers that the commercial prospects part should not inform the number. What we're really looking for from those numerical scores is we're trying to capture that feeling of when you finish reading something, do you want to go and tell everybody you ever met, this is amazing, you should read it? Or do you want to tell your greatest enemy, listen, man, I hate you, but I don't think you should waste your time with this, right? When you get an 8 out of 10 or better overall score, which historically for screenplays has been about 3.5% of the feedback that we've provided, you are automatically offered free hosting and another free evaluation. And if that is an 8 or better score, you are offered more free hosting and another evaluation, potentially in an endless loop. After you get 5 8+ scores, we basically say, okay, we get it. It's really good. We're willing to host this material this manuscript for as long as you want to host it for free, but we're not going to give you any more free feedback because that feedback is just going to tell us again that it's great. The other thing that I'd say is if you ever get feedback from us and you read the feedback and say, they mentioned an alien invasion, there's no alien invasion in my excerpt, email customer support, right? Sometimes there are copy and paste errors. People are writing in one window, copying to another, and there are mistakes. Sometimes readers fail to do their jobs. And we want to know about that so we can address it and replace that feedback as soon as possible. If your read indicates a close and full reading and it's a question of subjectivity, we're not going to replace your evaluation. But if there's a material failure, we absolutely want to know about it. And I think it's one of the main ways that differentiates us from almost anywhere else that you can submit. You're going to get your feedback back. You can read it and say, something's not right here. I want to have a conversation with somebody. Last thing I'll say, and this was a question that I think came up, how are readers assigned? It's sort of a 3-tiered system. The first is format. Readers are only assigned to read formats in which they have professional experience. Screenplay readers read screenplays. Television readers read TV pilots. fiction readers read manuscripts. Second tier is genre. You are only reading in the genres in which you have interest. If you are a horror person, but you're not interested in romantasy, we're not going to ask you to read romantasy. You're going to read horror and provide feedback on that. And then the last tier is what we would call a content consideration. When our readers sign up and throughout the time they're reading for us, there's a checklist of material that they can indicate they do not want to read about. And when you upload your excerpt and your manuscript, you indicate on that same checklist what is included in your manuscript. And so if a reader does not want to read about gun violence, sexual assault, anything, your material will not be matched with someone who feels that way. And that's by design because we don't want our readers reading things that are going to, be an unpleasant read for them, but also that they can't give, feedback that's not determined by other factors. And we don't think writers should have to deal with potentially having readers who know going in that it's not likely that they can give that material a fair shake. So yeah, I think that's the easiest way for me to describe all of that. Oh, and probably the last point to mention, when you're hosting your material, you get real-time tracking of the number of industry professionals that have looked at your script page, like viewed the script page itself with the information about it, and the number of people that have downloaded the script. So you can make an informed decision about whether it makes sense for you financially to pay for another month of hosting. And what I will say point blank is, our job is not to drive industry professionals to every manuscript. Our job is to drive as many industry professionals to manuscripts that we believe to be strong as possible. And if we're not getting you traffic for your manuscript on the site, you should probably stop giving us your money.
You're covering a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just trying to just watch the scroll as it goes down and like
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
the detail stuff.
Randy, I wanted to ask you what shape do you think their manuscript should be in as far as beta readers, paid freelance editors? Should it be game ready or what?
I get this question a lot. I am going to well, I'll tell you this. Writers ask me this question all the time, just in relation to querying. The answer that I'll say is that if you are sending your work out for representation or to be acquired, you should first things first. Free is the way to go, right? So the first thing I want to do is and I'm speaking as somebody who's a fiction writer. I actually have a novel that I'm working on. I've been working on it for 10 years. Before an agent ever looks at my book, before an editor ever looks at my book, I will have done everything I possibly could to take it as far as I can take it. So if that means 7 revisions, it will be 7 full revisions. I'm already on revision number 2, and it's looking like we're going to be 3. So I would say start there. And then obviously, well, not obviously, but this should be an obvious thing, is now you want to, me personally, I'm going to share it with people who are going to give me critical feedback. So that's my friends, right? If I went to school with people who are good readers for me, if I've met people through like my book club, or like if I have a best friend from back home who's really good at, revising and analytical, whatever the case, I am having those people give me line edits. I'm having those people write in the margins. I'm having those people talk about the themes and the character development and plot points and pace. I want all the feedback that I can get because all of that is free. And then once I've taken it as far as I can take it, and my close circle has read it closely and given me feedback about what my blind spots are in terms of how I write about this character versus this character, then I have a decision to make. Am I going to pay an editor to review my work? The Blacklist is just launched in fiction. Do I want to use the Blacklist site? Do I want to query? I can only speak for me. The thing I never tell writers to do is do this. You have to do this. I always give writers options. So for instance, I'll give you a real-time scenario that actually happened. We had beta writers who used the site before we launched. One of them was a published author who was going out on, I think it was book 3 or book 4. They had already, with an agent, sent that book out. They got no bites. They did 2 rounds of submissions, no bites. hey Randy, do you think I should upload this to the blacklist? Does this put my manuscript in jeopardy of being picked up? Absolutely not. And as a matter of fact, you should try to get it as many places as you can. So if you're using it on the or if you're putting it on the blacklist site, great. But also, if one of those editors comes back and says, "Hey, we actually love this and we want it. It took me a while because I was out on leave." Great. We don't own the rights to your project, so you can pull it down. Congrats to you. You got an editor who's going to acquire it. Make sure you read the contract so that you get the book deal that you deserve. And bravo. I'm like, let's toast to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it this way, and just maybe because I mean, this probably reflects more of my personal psychology than anything else. But I imagine a scenario where I've written anything, screenplay, novel, whatever, and I take it far enough, but like, could I have taken it further? Probably, but you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to put it up on the Blacklist website. If I paid for feedback and I got feedback and I read the feedback, and the reader makes a point that I kind of knew about my manuscript anyway, but now another person has seen it too. I'm going to be really annoyed at myself that I spent the money when I could have just addressed that issue before I uploaded it in the first place. So what I usually say is like, take it before you pay for anything in support of your work, your art, take it as far as you can alone. And then if you're going to pay for it, make sure you've exhausted all of the free resources at your disposal to make it better as well, so that you're not throwing, good money after bad when you could have gotten the same feedback and made the thing better before you paid money for it. And again, I'm not saying that everybody should pay money to the blacklist. I think everybody should create a writer profile. Again, that's free. But there are a lot of people for whom our paid services will be valuable. But even for those folks, I think you have to be really responsible about how you use the tool that we're presenting, because you want to put your best foot forward. Like, God forbid someone downloads your work and reads it, and you realize there's a change you could have made, or the notes make a point that you could have made. You want to put your best foot forward.
Okay, so how's it going? You have 6,000 readers. Is that total or for fiction only?
No,
And
that's 6,000 industry members.
Oh man.
okay, I was thinking it was a big database of screenplay
No. All
readers.
good.
Okay.
We
Um,
have, yeah, no. That's industry professional members. That is folks who have been approved to access the site and the material that is on it, like screenplay,
right.
whatever, because they are professionals in those spaces who can do something with it.
Okay. Well, someone asked something about the feedback givers. If they're all industry people, or the industry is kind of known for wanting certain things that the publishing industry wants. But this is freelance work outside of that. I'm just kind of wondering what your sense is of their approach to it, why they're interested in doing this.
I mean, we pay them for one. I'm sure that's a significant part of it. But yeah, no, I think we're paying people to provide feedback on literary work, and we're not asking them to be bound by what their bosses think about what the market is. We're specifically asking them, did you love this? When you finish reading it, do you want to tell other people that they should read it? Or is your reaction that no one, like, I wouldn't recommend that anybody spend their time with it because there are better things out there to read?
So all those industry people can see the fiction manuscripts, like the film people can browse the fiction.
Yeah.
I will, Franklin, I will say though that writers have the option to make their manuscripts private. So if for any reason a writer's like, you know what, for the time being, I'm not ready to make it public, so it's private, you have that right. So yeah, yes, industry members can see it if it's public, industry members only, but also the writers have those options in the privacy settings to change it. And Franklin, I know you have thoughts on why they should have it public. I'm just sharing that there is a switch there that writers can use.
The platform has been designed to give writers maximum control over what information is available. So you, for example, can decide that you don't want certain evaluations to be visible. Let's say that you've written something that's like was highly controversial or like bimodal in its response, right? Some people love it, some people hate it. You can say, you know what? I got an 8 on this one with a 4 on this one. I want the 8 feedback to be visible, but I don't want the 4 feedback to be visible in terms of the actual qualitative feedback. One place where that's not true is you have to make, there's a sort of graph on your manuscript page that shows the distribution of scores. You can't not include the 4. You can either choose to show the entire graph or not the graph at all. You can't just show the positive scores. But I also think it's valuable, and I say this as a former film person, I want to know about the things that some people love and some people hate, because a lot of people, some people loving it is what matters. I'm a lot more interested, and I think most people in these spaces are a lot more interested in something that elicits a very strong positive response from some, if it's not all, over something that everybody feels like is okay, right? So we want to present that kind of information that will be helpful to people to make them or excite them about reading things.
Is it okay if I answer a question? And
Please.
Lucy, thanks for this question. If my manuscript is not read for feedback, is it still eligible for industry professionals to look at? If so, why should I pay for feedback? Franklin, I know you love that question.
Wait, you should go ahead and answer it then. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'll say for one thing, is it eligible for industry member? Anything that's uploaded and hosted on the site, hosted, industry members can see. So that means that you're spending $30 a month to host on the site. That is it. So there's no evaluation tied to it. It's just you hosting. So yes, industry members can see that. Absolutely.
Now, as far as people looking at your manuscript, a lot of people are asking about theft and plagiarism. I know there's a scandal on book Twitter every few months about a stolen idea. What are the safeguards in place, and how should authors approach that if they're concerned?
I think the first safeguard in place is who we allow to even have access in the first place. We are only allowing reputable members of these industries onto the site, period, full stop. For example, the WGA maintains a list of companies that are not in good standing with the Writers Guild for whatever reason. And we will remove those industry members from the site if their companies or them as individuals show up on that list. We banned every industry member who was an employee of a struck company during the WGA strike. If you are not a person in good standing in these communities, you are not welcome on our site. So that's one. The second is that all of us are dealing with the reality that when you send your work to one person via email, it can literally go anywhere and you will never know. One of the differences about the blacklist is that when a manuscript or any piece of material is downloaded on the website, the PDF includes, as part of that PDF, let's just say technological information that would allow us to track who downloaded it and when. Now, we still don't have the ability to control if they forward it to other people, but that's also why it is critically important that we only allow access to the site as industry professional members to professionals who are in good standing. Yeah, I think that's probably the most direct answer.
Okay. Now about film options, because I know that's a big part of it for authors these days. They always want to hear about TV and film options.
Yeah.
So books are sometimes optioned before being sold to a publisher. Your agent might shop it as an option before getting the book deal, or before the book is actually published. Is that getting more common these days in Hollywood and TV? Do you feel like that helps get the book published if there is a film option in place, since it's more likely that there'll be press around the book?
My sense is that it is more common. My expectation is that the Blacklist website will make that even more common. My guess would be, and I don't have any evidence of that because it hasn't happened yet, but we'll see how it goes, is that a film or television option via the Blacklist website would also make it more likely that it would sell as a book. And not because of the blacklist per se, but just because if the thing has been optioned for film and television, depending on who the people are that are involved in that, that makes it more likely that it will become a film and television, or film or a television show, which has the potential to drive book sales and a smart publishing company would be wise to have the rights to publish that book when and if that happens. But there's certainly no guarantees about that. It's difficult to predict. I think we could probably have this conversation in a year or two and know a lot more. But, basic logic would suggest that those would be the market dynamics that would take place.
Well, it sounds like it will evolve, but for what you've already built over the years, are there genres of scripts that do better? Do you think this is best suited for thriller or any other kind of fiction at the moment?
I think that the blacklist functions primarily as a marketplace, and I think that to the extent that there are things that overperform on the blacklist website, it reflects what tends to overperform as material in Hollywood. So, if you write a low budget, high concept horror film that comes through the blacklist and gets a high score, it's very likely that there's going to be a lot of interest around that. If you write an original $200 million sci-fi movie, even if it gets high scores, it's less likely that that's going to get optioned because it's just harder to get that made in this environment. And I would imagine that for manuscripts, it'll roughly parallel that on the film and TV side. But I don't necessarily know that that will be true on the publishing side because at the end of the day, screenplays are a blueprint for a movie that gets made. The cost of making the book itself is not determined by, like, if you write a sci-fi book, it's the same as putting a thriller book out. The cost variance isn't quite the same. So I suspect there will be a greater focus on quality as opposed to additional considerations like additional budget. But again, that's speculation because we're still relatively early days.
Mm-hmm. And for self-publishing authors, we had a lot of questions about that. So they're not eligible for the unpublished manuscript awards because they have been published. But are they eligible for the feedback?
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
see Jane Nair as you can only host unpublished work, correct? That is incorrect. You can host unpublished and self-published. You have the rights to that. That's yours. So you can host it. If you have the rights to it, which means you can also get an evaluation. That is your work.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want with it.
Mm-hmm. And do you see self-published books getting optioned for production more often these days?
I'll use this as a way to talk about one of our partnerships. We have a partnership with Simon Kinberg Genre Films company. Simon and probably Genre may be best known for producing The Martian, which when he acquired it was a self-published novel. And when I told Simon what we were planning on doing, he was like, I would like to be involved in that. I know you guys are going to find great manuscripts because I know there's stuff that's out there that is not being published by the big houses, and I want to know about it. And so, we have a partnership with Simon. We're going to identify probably 10 manuscripts of a certain sort that he's looking for. We're going to share them with him, and he's intends to offer an 18-month for $25,000 option on one of the scripts as one of our partnerships. And there are, to be clear, many more such partnerships coming. Simon was just the one that we launched with, and it felt like the right partnership because of his history with The Martian.
Okay. I think we addressed this early on in a way, but people asked if you have any plans in the future to expand into nonfiction memoir. Would that just be years down the road, if ever?
Look, it's funny because my natural disposition oftentimes is to read narrative nonfiction, so I'm almost annoyed that we can't right now. You can submit a memoir to the website right now, but it will be read as fiction, right? And I think that sort of the borders of some of these classifications can get a little bit hazy from time to time. Nonfiction, I believe, requires providing feedback on nonfiction in particular requires, in many cases, very specific expertise in fact checking of the sort that we are frankly just not equipped to provide. Fiction is different in that way, and I think that that's why we're focused on that. It's hard for me to imagine a scenario where we are able to provide the level of service that I would want to provide on the nonfiction front. We are certainly open to it, and if anybody out there has a genius plan for how we can do it, all ears. But right now, our focus is getting fiction right, and then we'll sort of look up and see if there's other mountains to climb.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. I think we've covered the most important stuff here. We did receive a lot of questions about.
A
Oh, yes.
speed Q&A box.
I would love to just go through Q&A and help people out, answer some questions.
Yeah.
I
So
Yeah, I think
saw,
we're at the oddball.
we will trade off doing this. We'll do it like a cipher. Randy, you choose one, answer it. I'll do the same, and then we can indicate that they've been answered when we answer them.
yeah, I saw that someone asked if there are literary agents that have who rep screenwriters and novelists. Like, yes, there are scenarios where that happens, where you'll have an agent whose client is a novelist, and then that book sold, and that person is in the writer's room. So now it's a representation on both sides. So it's possible, but there's also the realm where you have Franklin, tell me if I'm wrong, you have an agent for your screen, film, and TV, and then you have your agent for books.
Yeah, that's more often than not the case. I think there are a lot of configurations these days. I think at the end of the day, what really matters is, do you have somebody on your team that can represent your interest in a negotiation that you trust to represent you in those negotiations? I wouldn't worry too much about their who's on their list, whatever, as long as they can make a valid case for that they can represent you. And some of that might be what their list is. That's really what matters. All right, I'm gonna try to start at the top. Ellie Leonard asked 3 questions. Is the literary evaluation team separate from the screenplay evaluation team, or do they overlap? I think we addressed that. They are separate. Do the film industry folks on the blacklist scan through the fiction portion as well, or do they stay pretty separate? Yes, they absolutely scan through the fiction portion as well. Hollywood people would love to find a great novel to adapt. And in fact, one of the exciting things about the fiction launch is the number of Hollywood people who have said, oh, this specifically is very exciting. I'll be using the site to find that. Last question is, will the blacklist be posting fiction contributors as well on social media? This is a really good question because I haven't talked about it yet. When you get an 8+ overall score from one of our paid readers, not only do you get offered a free month of hosting and free feedback, you get included in a weekly email that goes to our industry members across all of the industries saying, here are the things that our readers read this past week that they loved. And it's a list of all the things, title, description. There's a button in the email to send the PDF directly to your inbox, or you can click through to the website and look at more information there. We also post on social media, traditionally Twitter and Instagram. Hey, here are the things that have gotten really high scores. You can opt out of that as a writer. If you don't want your work celebrated on our social media channels when you get a high score, you can say, no, I'd rather not. But yes, we will absolutely be doing that with fiction. We will probably start that towards the end of October, early November, because we wanted to go through the first couple hundred submissions that we got to identify the good stuff and then sort of batch announce them. But just as an insight into how we think, there are people that submitted in the first couple of days of the site, got feedback, got an 8+ score, and normally they'd get included in that email right after that. The Monday after that, that email would go out. But because we're not sending that email, we're giving all of those people 2 months of free hosting in addition, because we want them to be on the site and take advantage of the upside of us drawing attention to their work.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to Ashley Barnhill. So Franklin, you're at the top, I'm at the bottom. I'll just work my way up towards you. Will any of the possible upcoming opportunities accept self-published novels? Yes, and we'll make that clear in the guidelines. The Simon Kinberg partnership is one that does accept self-published novels. And I can't get into the details, but we do have partnerships that we will be announcing later this year and early next year. And self-published novels will be included in that as well.
Jeanette de Beauvoir says, I see that you're honoring the Writers Guild members in membership. Will you extend that to the Authors Guild? I believe that is a reference to the fact that Writers Guilds with which we have a permanent relationship, Writers Guild East and West, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, pretty much most of the English-speaking world, and I think Italy, and maybe Spain also, have a 20% discount on paid services on the Blacklist website. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, we're doing the same thing for the Authors Guild, and if we're not, we're definitely down to do it.
We should.
Yeah,
We should. And I think I spoke, I don't want to put people on blast, but I spoke to some of your team that said that we were going to work that out. So we'll figure it out behind the scenes. But the answer is yes, absolutely. I would love to make that possible. Yes.
Yeah, we would love to if that
Yeah, we
works
just
out.
need to figure out a way to confirm that people are in fact members of the Authors Guild, and we'll figure that out behind the scenes. But yes, we'll be honoring that in the same way.
All right. Kaja, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. My apologies. So to clarify, if a book has already been traditionally published, the blacklist is not a viable option to get it in front of industry members. That depends. If you do you have an option on that book? If that book does not have an option, it's probably best to list it on your profile. You don't, so you're not uploading anything because you don't, the rights belong with the publisher. So the best bet is to list it. You can tag it. So if it's a coming of age story, you can tag it coming of age. If it's a love story, you can tag it with that. The idea being that industry members on the film and TV side, it becomes searchable now for them. So if they find it interesting, they can reach out and go, "Hey, I saw this description. I'm going to buy the book. I'm really interested in talking to your reps about potentially optioning it." I hope that makes sense.
I'm going to try to answer two. Bev Irwin says, if you post your book to the blacklist, then you are reducing your sales potential. That's just wrong. It's just not the case. Again, you are posting it to a small community of approved industry professionals in a community that is explicitly designed whereby if your work is good, we're going to tell everybody that your work is good, which quite frankly has the significant likelihood of increasing the sales potential, if only by increasing the visibility of your book with the strong, enthusiastic recommendation of someone who various industries have come to trust. We will see if that is borne out. It has been a month. But in the film and television space, it has been exactly the opposite. And the second question, from Amy Bernstein, on the writer's profile page, one of the first questions asks what you've done in television, parentheses, highest staffing level. That doesn't come across to me as fiction book centric. And what I will say is that it's not fiction book centric because the writer profile is designed so that whatever kind of writer you are, you can indicate what your writing is. And there are a lot of writers who are writing in TV and writing novels. There are some writers who are writing just novels. There are people who are writing television and film. There are people that are writing theater, fiction, and television. And we want to make sure that that writer profile can be a landing page for you as a writer, period, regardless of the format. And if it's not relevant to you, don't answer the question. It won't show up as part of your profile.
Danny Bishop. Danny, thanks for the question. Screenwriters sometimes register scripts with WGA as a matter of record as a safeguard against plagiarism. Does the Authors Guild have a similar service?
No, we used to decades ago, but do not currently offer that. But it's pretty simple at the U.S. Copyright Office website. Yeah, somebody asked about that. Your work is copyrighted as soon as you set it down on paper or computer, so you can issue a takedown notice if needed. You can't sue for damages if somebody prints your book and sells it for money or infringes otherwise, unless it's registered with the Copyright Office. That's the main reason to register with the Copyright Office. So you don't really need to do that until it's getting close to publication, and a traditional publisher is supposed to do it for you contractually.
Franklin, I'm gonna take one more question, just like you did. Is this only accessible for Black writers, or can I join as so? All writers, no matter your background, demographic, gender, all writers, period.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to another question by Bev Irwin, which I think is a really good one. What if you have adapted your own book to script? And you can submit the book or the script because the rules around scripts are that you have to have the right to the script or any underlying materials if it is an adaptation or it needs to be public domain. And if you own the rights to the book, then you have the right to submit the script. And as one story, there was a script that was uploaded to the Blacklist website called Mr. Malcolm's List that we had a podcast that we did probably 10 years ago that was one of iTunes' best podcasts of 2015. It was basically a table read podcast where we would table read scripts that we found on the website with, casts of actors that people recognized and make available the table read for their listening pleasure. That was a very popular episode of the podcast. My now wife, who's a director, actually listened to that podcast and said, "Oh, I've always wanted to make a Jane Austen style movie. I'm going to go try to get the rights to that screenplay." What she then discovered is that script was an adaptation of the writer's self-published novel, Mr. Malcolm's List. She made a short film with Refinery 29 that was very popular and had 2 million views in its first month. The self-published novel then sold to Berkeley Press, I believe, as part of a 3-book deal. And then the movie was made by Bleecker Street and came out 2 summers ago. And if I'm going to brag on my wife for a second, I think it's like 85 on Rotten Tomatoes. But the adaptation of book to script to movie, book sales, ecosystem is exactly why, in some ways, we wanted to extend the platform to fiction, is because those worlds are closer than maybe the infrastructure that currently existed or has existed in a legacy manner is optimal. And we wanted to make sure that it is operating as efficiently as it can be.
Curious on your thoughts about feedback on novels with twist. In a 120-page screenplay, the entire story transpires with the novel. The main twist may not happen until page 300, which would not be read. Thoughts? I mean, the same goes for. I'm not gonna say the author's name, but there is an author who is very well published and successful, and just had a adaptation on Apple TV recently, and the twist doesn't come till well after page 100. So how did that book get published? It's the merit of the work. It's the agent saw the work, saw the writing, and everything that was in those first 20 pages spoke to that agent and that editor, and they wanted to see 50 pages, and then they want to see the rest of it. And so the same goes here. Is if and this is something that I was told in workshops by people who were well published, past 5 books, and also something that I've been coached up on by editors. The if the twist is the whole story, what are we really doing? Like, what's the story then? And so the merit of the writing, the character development, the pace, the premise, these are all things that are very important, and editors can, and the voice as well. I do not want to forget about voice, because I believe that there are a lot of writers watching this that understand voice very well. Those things are really important, and those are things that agents and editors can identify very quickly, even if the execution is a little off. That's where they come in. That's where they do the work. If the idea is there, and they see where they can implement and influence that work to make it better. And so I think, like, if you're somebody who has a twist in your novel, you shouldn't feel left out of that, whether you're querying or you're using the blacklist. I think that the writing itself should shine through, the voice, the pace, all of those elements that make a story really good. I mean, I think everyone here has probably read a book with a twist, but it's the lead up to that, right? It's the things that really pull us in and keep us reading. I think those are really important, and that's what agents and editors are always looking for.
I've switched it up, just recognizing that we're extremely limited on time to the most upvotes option. And we haven't talked about AI yet. And so I want to address Margaret Dumas' question.
Yeah.
How uploaded work from being scraped by AI? First and foremost, by the membership that we have who have access to the scripts at all. And the second is, so our CTO, who comes from a technology security background, suffice it to say that we monitor downloads aggressively. And if ever there was someone who was downloading material in a way that indicated anything other than human behavior, not only would they not be able to continue to download, but they would be banned from the site for life. So there's not, I mean, just generally speaking on the AI thing, like, I have a fundamental belief that technology should exist in the service of artists, not as a replacement for artists. I don't believe that AI can do the work of a human reader and communicating a human emotional response to a piece of work. And so deploying AI for one of our readers would be an immediately fireable offense if they did. And we definitely are not making the material that has been shared with us available to an LLM, or allowing it to be scraped by one, because it would violate the contract that we have with you about only sharing the material with the industry professional members that we have approved based on their ability to be helpful to you.
That's great. Yes, the Authors Guild is very involved with AI stuff. I'm almost afraid to talk about it because I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to speak for the guild. But it's a major concern, of course. And I know that your stance also includes that the feedback editors shouldn't use AI, to help generate the reviews and things like that.
Yeah.
How much more time do we have, Johnny?
Yeah, we're past the hour, so we can wrap it up now. But if you want to answer another question, that's
I see some questions. I see another question I want to answer. Franklin, how you feeling?
I can stay for a while. I want to be respectful of your time though.
Yeah.
no,
Not
please
Johnny,
go.
he's talking to you because he knows I'll stay
I'm
all
fine.
night.
I'm fine. Let's go 5 more minutes.
Okay. I see that someone's asking, in addition to the excerpt, do fiction writers include a synopsis so readers know what the full story is? So what we ask writers to do is include a pitch. So your pitch, which is the same thing that if you're sitting in a room with an agent and you have to describe your book because there's a whole line of writers, it's your pitch. That's what we're asking you. The feedback that we've gotten from writers in the beta testing was, we apply to fellowships, we apply to residencies, we apply to MFA programs, we apply to contests. They always ask us to include all of this information, just make it straight to the point. And so that's what we're doing. And I think the industry members appreciate that too. Franklin, go ahead.
Someone asked, if you upload a novel and receive low scores and decide to withdraw and make some changes, can you upload again for a new evaluation? And can this be a disadvantage for the author? You absolutely can, and the site is designed explicitly so that it's not a disadvantage to you. So every time you upload a new draft of your work, you upload it as a new piece of work. So let's say I upload my novel, I pay for feedback, I get the feedback back and I read it and I'm like, oh wow, points were made. I now know how I can make this better. I go back and rework it. I go back and I want to host it again and pay for a new evaluation. Literally no one on the industry professional side of the site would ever know that you hosted it before or got feedback on it before, unless you wanted to associate that past feedback with the new manuscript, which I'm guessing you wouldn't want to do. We've really designed the website to be a sort of do no harm thing. So you can get feedback. If it's bad, you can hide the feedback. But if it's good, you can make it public. If you get feedback and you just don't want anybody to know you ever hosted it, you take it down. No one ever even has to know that it existed. That's how we've designed the site. What we want to do is put a very bright spotlight on the things that are great. The things that are not great or not attracting attention, they just sort of disappear. And that's
Franklin,
why we on like how many people have downloaded it, because if it is disappearing, we want you to know that no one's paying attention to it, and so you should probably stop giving us your money.
Franklin, it looks like we have time for one more question, which goes to me. Cornelius Franklin asked, because high fantasy would be expensive to produce, would you recommend an author of a high fantasy novel not apply to Genre Films manuscript partnership awards? Cornelius, if you have already planned to host and do an evaluation on the site, do not cut out your blessing. You have no idea what the people who are going to make that decision for that partnership are willing to do with a great project. So that is, and then, by the way, once you have an evaluation, you can opt into any of the opportunities that are related to fiction if your project is in a manuscript for free. Do not cut out your blessings. Don't do that. There's an opportunity there. It's free. Take advantage of it. You never know.
I want to put just an accent mark on what Randy just said. Every opportunity that exists on the site, the Unpublished Novel Award, the Simon Kinberg opportunity, every other partnership that we will announce in the coming months. Once you have received one evaluation on the website, you can submit to every single program that you are eligible for at no additional cost. It is free. That's true on the screenplay side as well. The idea is once you have validated that your thing is good, you should not have to pay more to submit to opportunities that you will be eligible to, right? It should be the opposite, is that once you've validated that your thing is good, there should be more things available to you, not more requests for your money. And that, again, that's very much how the site is designed. And that's why we give you free hosting and more free evaluations when you get a high score. We want to keep the good stuff on the site, We want to continue to find out how more people are going to respond to it, and we don't think that you as the writer should be bearing that cost. Last
I love
thing,
that.
go.
Oh,
I'm on Twitter. Randy, I think you're on Twitter. If there are other questions that you have, we have a very thorough frequently asked questions. We have customer support. We are very much available on the internet to answer your questions. I have a deep and abiding belief that if we as an organization are going to ask you to pay us and trust us with your work, you have a right to expect that your questions about how we do it, why we do it that way, and like what we intend to do with it, we have an obligation and you have a right to expect answers to those questions. And so we are available on many, many fronts to answer them. I can't promise that you'll love the answers, but I can promise you that we'll answer the questions.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. I wanted to say one thing because I know there's a lot of WGA people or people not familiar with the Authors Guild. Basically, the Authors Guild is like the Writers Guild, but writing a book isn't labor under US law, so we're not a labor union, but it's a similar thing, like a professional club where we provide legal services and other things like that. And so if you're ever offered a publishing contract or otherwise qualify, like there's ways for self-published authors to qualify, you can join the Authors Guild for our services.
I'm a member.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much to Claire from the Blacklist, who might have carpal tunnel syndrome from answering about a question a minute for the last hour. Thank you, Claire. Yeah, get in touch with the Blacklist and the Authors Guild for any other questions you might have. And this is great stuff. I'm excited to see where this goes from here. Thank you, Franklin. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you for having us.